Sergeant Mason Cade's last memory before blacking out was the shuddering roar of the Vanguard dawn tearing apart in the storm. The ship's hull groaned, twisting like metal paper under a savage force, and then darkness swallowed him whole. When Mason's eyes snapped open, his ears rang with a piercing whistle, metal grinding, the steady hiss of escaping atmosphere. Blinking against a sun too bright for this strange world, he found himself sprawled among jagged metal shards and smoking wires. His uniform was torn, limbs aching as if crushed beneath the ship's carcass. He was alone. A thin breeze carried, the scent of scorched earth and something else, raw, primal, and alive. Mason forced himself upright, testing each limb. The emergency beacon had sputtered out no signal. His comlink crackled with static. No help was coming anytime soon. From the nearby jungle, the silence was broken by a deep, guttural growl that made his skin crawl. He froze. The sound wasn't from any creature he'd known. It vibrated through the air, low and thunderous like the planet itself was exhaling. Then the sky exploded. A shadow swept overhead, enormous wings beating, scales shimmering with an eerie bioluminescence. The creature screamed, a sound part shriek, part roar, and part thunderclap. Mason dropped flat, dust and debris kicked up by the passing beast. The dragon circled, eyes glowing like molten amber as it hunted. His pulse slammed against his ribs. He'd trained for hostile environments, for war zones, for alien worlds, but nothing in the Corps' syllabus had prepared him for this. Scrambling back, Mason scanned the wreckage for anything useful. A shattered crate spilled supplies, ration bars, a flickering plasma pistol, scraps of armor. He grabbed what he could and sprinted toward a cluster of jagged rocks, hoping to stay hidden. The dragon's cry echoed again, closer this time. Mason crouched behind the rocks, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He could see the creature circling above, wings slicing the air, talons ready to strike. Then it landed. The ground trembled under its weight. The dragon's scales rippled, glowing faintly as it flexed massive claws tipped with curved blades sharper than any knife. It sniffed the air, nostrils flaring with sulfurous smoke. Mason's breath caught as the beast's head lowered, eyes locking onto him. Instinct screamed to run, but the rocks gave him a narrow line of sight and cover. Slowly, Mason reached for the plasma pistol, fingers trembling. A sudden roar split the air, louder, angrier. From the jungle, more shadows emerged. Smaller, faster dragons, hunting in packs, their eyes fixed on Mason and the giant predator. The alpha dragon growled, shifting to defend its prey. Mason. There was no way out. The pack spread out, cutting off escape routes. Mason fired the plasma pistol once, the bright beam scorching a dragon's flank. It howled and lunged, claws raking the air. Mason rolled behind a boulder as talons crashed where he'd stood moments ago, shattering stone. He scrambled up, adrenaline burning through exhaustion, sprinting blindly toward the dense jungle. Behind him, the pack gave chase, their shrieks merging into a terrifying cacophony. Branches whipped his face. Roots snagged his boots. Every muscle screamed for relief. But Mason knew better than to stop. Survival was a game of endurance, and he had no intention of becoming dragon food. Suddenly he stumbled into a shallow ravine, narrow and shadowed. The dragons faltered briefly, wary of the terrain. Breathing hard, Mason slipped into the ravine, pressing himself against the wall, heart hammering in his ears. He could hear the dragons' frustrated growls, their wings beating against the cliffs, for now he was safe. But only barely. Mason's mind raced. This planet wasn't just dangerous. It was a crucible designed to burn away weakness. He had no rescue, no allies, and a planet full of predators who'd see him as nothing more than prey. But Mason Cade was not just any survivor. He was a human, and humans had a reputation. They survived. They adapted. And when cornered, they became something else entirely. As the dragons retreated into the sky, Mason stared up at the swirling clouds overhead. The storm that had brought his ship down still raged, but his fight had only just begun. because on Apharian 7 the dragons were at the top. But they hadn't met the ultimate predator yet. Mason's breath came in ragged gasps as the last echoes of the dragon's roars faded into the oppressive jungle canopy. Darkness was falling fast on Apharian 7, and the shadows between twisted trees seemed to writhe with unseen eyes. He couldn't stay out in the open. Not tonight. His hands trembled as he scavenged the wreckage's perimeter for anything useful. Among broken containers and shredded gear, he found a small med kit, a few energy bars, and a half-broken tactical knife. It wasn't much, but it was something. Cade set to work quickly, using his field training to build a crude shelter against a fallen tree trunk. He fashioned a spear from a jagged metal shard, sharpening one end with a rock. The dragons were predators built for destruction, but Mason had weapons of a different kind: intelligence, ingenuity, and relentless will. A sudden movement caught his eye, a flicker of something small, fast, a glimpse of scales flashing in the fading light. Mason froze. From the brush emerged a creature unlike the others he'd seen. Smaller, no bigger than a dog, but every bit as vicious looking. Its scales shimmered dark emerald with streaks of red, and its eyes glowed faintly in the twilight. It snarled, exposing rows of needle-sharp teeth. The hatchling. Mason's mind raced. To kill it meant fewer enemies in the jungle, but to let it live risked being tracked by its pack. Yet the creature didn't attack. Instead, it watched him with something almost curious. Cade lowered his spear slowly. "You're just a kid," he whispered, voice hoarse. The hatchling hissed, then retreated into the undergrowth. Mason's instincts screamed caution, but a strange feeling stirred inside. Survival here wasn't just brute force. Maybe, just maybe, understanding this world was the key. He spent the night on edge, every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves making him flinch. The jungle was alive with sounds, insects, alien birds, and far off, the distant roars of dragons staking their claim. Morning came as a dull gray light filtered through the canopy. Mason set out to explore, moving carefully along a narrow ridge. He marked his path with crude scratches in the bark, a lifeline back to safety. Hours passed. He discovered claw marks gouged into the stone, fresh tracks that twisted deeper into the jungle. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing cry shattered the stillness. Mason froze again, this time closer, desperate. He crept toward the sound, moving through thick ferns and vines until he found the source. A juvenile dragon lay caught in a trap of tangled vines, its wing broken awkwardly at the joint. Its eyes were wild, filled with pain and fury. Around it, blood soaked the leaves. Mason's pulse quickened. The creature's breathing was ragged, fire barely flickering at the corners of its mouth. His first instinct was to finish it, a quick strike to end suffering and eliminate a dangerous predator. But something in the dragon's gaze stopped him. The beast wasn't just a killing machine. It was scared, desperate, alone. Cade hesitated, weighing his options. Helping it could make an enemy, but ignoring it could mean death. With a swift decision, he reached into his medkit and tore strips from his uniform to bandage the wing. The dragon hissed and tried to snap, but Mason moved with careful, steady hands. The hatchling from the night before watched from a distance, silent and alert. Hours later, Mason dragged the injured dragon to his shelter, forcing himself to feed it scraps from his rations. The beast growled but accepted the food. As night fell, Mason sat by the fire watching the creature struggle to breathe. The jungle no longer felt quite so alien. Maybe survival here meant more than just weapons and traps. Maybe it meant understanding the enemy. Suddenly, a crackle came from his comlink. Static. Then a faint voice, distorted, alien, desperate. Mason jerked upright, heart pounding. The message was too broken to understand fully, but one word echoed clearly. Alpha. The Alpha Dragon, the undisputed ruler of the skies. Mason swallowed hard. If the Alpha came looking, The hunt was far from over because on Afarian 7, mercy was a weakness, and the ultimate predator was just waking up. Mason barely slept that night. The wounded juvenile dragon lay close, restless and unpredictable, eyes gleaming with raw pain and unspoken rage. It was a living weapon, but also a puzzle. The planet's predators were not mere beasts. They were something more, intelligent, adaptive, and deadly. He studied the dragon's physiology with careful fascination. Its scales shimmered like molten glass, but beneath the armor-like plating, he found flexible muscles and veins pulsing with a strange bioluminescent fluid. The creature's chest heaved in shallow breaths, and Mason noted the smell, sharp and electric, like ozone. Curiosity overpowered caution. Using a sharp piece of scrap metal, Mason carefully cut into the dragon's wing to examine the damage. A strange membrane stretched between the broken bones, faintly glowing, pulsing with energy. The wing wasn't just for flight, it was a conduit channeling some form of organic electricity. Suddenly the dragon snarled, muscles tensing. Mason jumped back as a jet of blazing plasma erupted from the creature's mouth, scorching the ground mere inches from his feet. The heat was intense, and the air shimmered with charged particles. His breath hitched. The dragons weren't just breathing fire. They were shooting plasma, a living weapon forged by evolution itself. His survival instincts kicked in. If he could harvest that power, he might just stand a chance. Over the next days, Mason scavenged and experimented. Using fragments of his broken ship's tech and materials from the jungle, he created crude traps and containers to capture the dragon's plasma secretions. Viscous, glowing fluids secreted from the creature's glands. He fashioned a weapon. A jagged blade tipped with crystallized plasma residue, humming faintly with stored energy. The weapon wasn't perfect. Sometimes it fizzled out or overheated. But in a world where claws and teeth ruled, it was a game changer. With his new plasma blade strapped to his side, Mason ventured out, no longer just hiding, but hunting. He tracked a small dragon pack to a shallow river. The beasts drank warily, their scales reflecting the dull sun. Mason crouched, heart hammering, as he readied his weapon. With a swift throw, he struck the lead dragon's flank, the plasma blade igniting on impact, searing through scales and muscle. The dragon screamed, a sound part rage, part pain, echoing across the water. The pack scattered, but Mason pressed, the attack weaving through the trees and striking fast. By the end, he had killed 3 juveniles, harvesting parts of their bodies for armor, fuel, and tools. But victory came at a price. In the distance, the deep, resonant roar of the alpha dragon shattered the silence. It was a warning and a challenge. Mason's pulse quickened. The alpha wasn't just a predator. It was a sentinel, a warlord who ruled the skies with unmatched intelligence and power. He knew the stakes had just been raised. Back at camp, Mason reinforced his shelter with the dragon bones and scales. His plasma blade hummed faintly at his side, a reminder of the new path he walked, one forged in blood and fire. Night fell, thick and heavy. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Then came the sound, wings beating against the air, low and terrifying. Mason looked up as the alpha dragon emerged from the darkness, massive and scarred, eyes glowing like twin suns. It landed with a ground-shaking thud, blocking the only exit. The ultimate predator had found him. But Mason was no longer prey. He gripped his plasma blade tighter, muscles coiled and ready. Tonight, the hunt would begin. The alpha dragon's heavy footfalls shook the ground beneath Mason's feet. The air vibrated with the beast's low, rumbling growl, a sound that seemed to shake the very trees. Mason tightened his grip on the plasma blade, every muscle coiled. Like a spring, he could feel the predator's eyes boring into him, measuring, calculating. This was no mindless beast. It was a creature of cunning, ancient and ruthless. The alpha circled slowly, wings spreading wide to block the weak moonlight filtering through the jungle canopy. Mason's heart pounded, but fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. He was a soldier, trained to fight when outmatched. and now he was no longer the hunted. He was the hunter. Mason retreated deliberately, leading the dragon toward a narrow ravine he'd spotted earlier. The terrain was rough and uneven, but it gave him an advantage. He knew the dragon's size would limit its movement. Using scavenged parts and dragon bones, Mason had laid traps, spiked pits covered with leaves, tripwires rigged to release nets, woven from high-tensile alien fibers. As the alpha lunged forward, Mason sprinted, diving just as the dragon's claw crashed down, shattering a boulder. The trap triggered with a snap, and a net hurtled through the air, tangling around the beast's foreleg. The dragon roared in fury, thrashing to break free. But Mason wasn't finished. He slashed at the net with his plasma blade, igniting the fibers in a blaze of searing light. The dragon howled, retreating momentarily, smoke curling from the burning ropes. Mason pressed the attack, striking at the dragon's leg joints, where scales were thinner. The plasma blade seared through tough hide, forcing the beast to stagger. But the alpha wasn't beaten. With a roar that shook the ravine walls, it launched into the air, wings beating powerfully. Mason rolled clear as the dragon swooped down, talons extended like giant scythes. He dodged behind a rocky outcrop, feeling the wind roar past his face. This was a game of survival, and Mason was learning fast. The dragon adapted quickly, circling, higher, using its wings to create gusts that knocked Mason off balance. He scrambled to a higher ledge, searching for a vantage point. His eyes caught a glint, a makeshift flamethrower cobbled from his scavenged supplies and dragon plasma fuel. It was risky, but it might just even the odds. Mason ignited the weapon, and a roaring jet of fire blasted upward as the dragon dove again. Caught off guard, the alpha screeched, wings singed. The hunter had turned the environment itself into a weapon. For hours the battle raged, a deadly dance of cunning and instinct, fire and fury. Exhaustion clawed at Mason's limbs, but he refused to yield. Each strike, each trap was a message. Humanity will not be broken. As dawn approached, the alpha dragon, battered and bleeding, let out a final defiant roar and retreated into the jungle shadows. Mason sank to his knees, gasping for breath. His body ached, armor scorched, and his plasma blade flickered with low energy. But he was alive. More than that, he had won a battle in a war that was only just beginning. The jungle was quiet, but Mason knew it would not stay that way. Somewhere, deep in the shadows, the other dragons were watching, and they would come back, because Mason Cade was no longer the easy prey they once hunted. He had become the ultimate predator. Mason's body ached, every muscle screaming from the relentless battle with the alpha dragon. Yet as dawn's pale light filtered through the thick jungle canopy, he pressed deeper into the forbidden territory, the dragon's ancestral lair. The path narrowed, flanked by towering rock formations scarred by ancient claw marks. The jungle's roar dimmed here, replaced by an eerie silence that weighed heavy on Mason's senses. Ahead, jagged ruins emerged from the overgrowth, remnants of an alien civilization swallowed by time. Broken pillars, fractured walls etched, with strange symbols, and collapsed archways whispered of a lost empire. Mason's breath caught. The logs from the crashed ship had hinted at this place, the once thriving hub of the Drakari, an extinct species who domesticated the dragons before vanishing without a trace. He approached cautiously, eyes scanning for danger. The ruins felt alive, as if the stones themselves watched. Inside a shattered chamber, Mason found what he'd been searching for, a data console half buried beneath rubble, its screen flickering weakly. With trembling hands, he powered it up.
Static filled the air before an image materialized, a holographic recording of a Drakari scientist, eyes wide with fear. The Alpha, it's evolving. Intelligence beyond anything we predicted. The dragons are no longer beasts. They are strategists.
Predators of the mind, the scientist's voice cracked. We tried to control them, to bend them to our will, but the Alpha learned our tactics, turned them against us. We failed. Mason's heart pounded. The Alpha wasn't just a creature of instinct. It was a ruthless warlord, capable of outthinking him. Suddenly, the chamber trembled. A low growl echoed from the shadows. The Alpha had followed him here. Mason darted through the ruins. The dragon's massive form blocking his path as it landed with thunderous force. Its eyes gleamed with cruel intelligence, studying Mason as a hunter would a quarry. The beast lunged. Mason dove aside, plasma blade igniting, slashing at the dragon's flank. Scales cracked, blood sizzling where the energy met flesh. But the Alpha was relentless, striking with claws and tail, forcing Mason to retreat deeper into the labyrinth. Around them, the ruins seemed to shift. Fallen beams, loose stones, hidden, traps left by the Drakari. Mason seized an opening, triggering a hidden mechanism. A wall slid aside, revealing a chamber filled with ancient weaponry, crystalline devices humming with energy. With no time to lose, Mason grabbed what he could carry, a crystalline spear that pulsed with lethal power and a compact energy shield, designed to absorb and reflect attacks. The Alpha roared, sensing his prize. The final battle was imminent. Mason squared his shoulders, weapon in hand. He was no longer just a survivor. He was humanity's last hope, a warrior standing against the planet's deadliest predator. The jungle's eerie silence shattered as Mason stepped into the ruined chamber, the crystalline spear humming in his hand, the energy shield strapped firmly to his arm. Every instinct screamed danger. The Alpha Dragon was close, and it knew this was the final battleground. The beast appeared without warning, a shadow coalescing from the darkness, massive wings casting a suffocating gloom. Its eyes burned with primal fury and cunning intelligence, the scars on its scales deepening. The menace it exuded. Mason braced himself. The Alpha roared, an earth-shaking bellow that rattled stone and bone alike. It lunged forward, jaws snapping, claws extended. Mason raised his shield just in time. The dragon's claws struck with the force of a battering ram, sparks flying as the energy shield absorbed the blow. He countered with a swift thrust of the crystalline spear, the tip glowing bright as it pierced the dragon's thick hide. The Alpha twisted, muscles rippling, and reared back to unleash a devastating blast of plasma fire. Mason dove aside, feeling the heat sear the air where he'd stood moments before. Adrenaline surged through him as he weaved and dodged, the dance of life and death playing out with brutal elegance. The spear's pulse and the shield's protective hum became extensions of his own body, a fusion of man and alien technology against the raw power of the dragon. The fight dragged on, both combatants battered but unyielding. Mason's vision blurred, breath ragged, but he pushed forward, driven by survival and the burning will to conquer. Suddenly, a surge of energy coursed through the spear. Mason seized the moment, channeling all his strength into a decisive strike. The spear's crystalline tip shattered the dragon's chest plate, sending shards of glowing crystal deep into its heart. The Alpha staggered, eyes wide with shock and pain. With a final roar, the beast collapsed, the ground trembling beneath its massive bulk. Mason dropped to his knees, exhausted but victorious. The jungle fell silent once more. He had faced the ultimate predator and survived. But, as he looked down at the fallen Alpha, a new thought struck him. This planet was changing, evolving, and so was he. The Alpha Dragon's death echoed across the jungle like a thunderclap, shaking the ancient trees and stirring the planet's fierce inhabitants. Mason Cade stood over the fallen giant, every muscle screaming, every breath a ragged gasp of exhaustion and triumph. But this was no time for rest. The death of the Alpha was not just an end, it was a beginning. A sudden ripple passed through the jungle, a wave of unease as if the very ecosystem sensed the shift in power. Mason's eyes scanned the horizon. He wasn't alone. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall, lithe, and moving with an uncanny grace. Clad in armor made from dragon scales and organic tech scavenged from the ruins, the stranger's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. "Human," the figure said, voice smooth and calm. "You have done what no other has, slain the Alpha, but this planet does not forgive." Mason tensed, readying his plasma blade. The stranger raised a hand in peace. "I am Kalen, last of the Drakari. Guardians, we once ruled alongside dragons, but now we watch and wait. Mason's mind reeled. The legends were true. Not all Drakari had vanished. Some survived, hiding in the shadows. Kalen studied Mason closely. You have changed, human. The dragon's plasma has altered you. You are no longer just flesh and bone. Mason flexed his fingers. He had felt the change. Faster reflexes, sharper senses, a flicker of energy coursing beneath his skin. The plasma had bonded with him, awakening something primal. I'm no victim, Mason said, voice steady. I'm the ultimate predator now. Kalen nodded slowly. Good, because the jungle's balance has shattered. Without the alpha, chaos spreads. Packs rise in war, and worse, there are darker forces stirring beneath the surface. Mason frowned. What kind of forces? Kalen's eyes darkened. The Drakari's ancient enemies, bioengineered horrors locked away when our empire fell. If they awaken, nothing will survive. A chill ran down Mason's spine. He had thought the dragons were the planet's greatest threat. Now he knew. They were only the beginning. Kalen extended a hand. Join me. Together we can restore balance, Yam, and harness the power within you to save this world. Mason hesitated, then clasped the offered hand. The alliance was uneasy, forged from necessity and mutual respect. As they journeyed deeper into the jungle, Kalen shared lost knowledge, secrets of Drakari technology, the dragon's true nature, and the looming shadow that threatened all life. Mason absorbed it all, feeling the line between human and predator blur. He was becoming something new, a warrior born from fire, blood, and ancient power. The ultimate predator was no longer just surviving. He was ready to rule. The jungle was alive with a growing storm, thunder rumbling through the thick canopy, and lightning crackling like the very breath of the planet itself. Mason Cade stood at the edge of the ancient Drakari stronghold, the air thick with charged energy and danger. Beside him, Kalen readied the crystalline spear and the compact energy shield, eyes scanning the shadows. Below them, in the depths of the ruins, something stirred, something ancient and terrible. The bioengineered horrors Kalen had warned about were awakening. Mason felt the plasma coursing within him pulse like a second heartbeat, connecting him to the planet's primal power. He was no longer just human, no longer just survivor. He was something greater, a fusion of man, machine, and the fierce spirit of the dragons. As they descended into the catacombs, monstrous shapes slithered from the darkness, grotesque amalgamations of metal and flesh, twisted and hungry. Their eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence and their claws dripped with corrosive acid. The battle was brutal. Mason's plasma blade sang through the air, cutting down horrors with deadly precision. Kalen unleashed bursts of crystalline energy, shattering the creatures with shimmering blasts. But the monsters came in waves, relentless and merciless. In the chaos, Mason caught a glimpse of a towering figure, the core of the nightmare. A massive bioengineered leviathan, fused with dragon DNA and Drakari tech. Its body a writhing mass of metal plates and sinew. Its maw opened wide, releasing a blast of searing energy. Mason met the attack head-on, raising his shield to absorb the blast. The force slammed him back, but the surge of plasma within him flared brighter than ever before. He charged forward, spear glowing with lethal light. With a primal roar, he drove the spear deep into the Leviathan's chest. The creature convulsed, sparks flying as its system short-circuited. With a final shudder, it collapsed, the ruin shaking beneath its fall. Silence followed. Mason stood panting, wounds burning but spirit unbroken. Kalen approached, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. You have done what no one could, Kalen said. You have become the ultimate predator, protector of this world. Mason looked out at the dawn breaking over the jungle canopy, the first light casting away shadows and fear. This planet is alive, Mason said quietly. And so am I. Together, we'll make sure it survives. The legacy of fire, born from dragons forged in battle, was now Mason's to carry. A new dawn had risen. The hunter had become the guardian,